Sorry about that, just had to get into the Nosferatu spirit. This is a very scary movie, obviously, being completely soundless and being from the 20s. Anyway, let's jump right in. Nosferatu is a black and white silent film from 1922. It is a horror film, from what I can tell, and is, I think, the oldest feature-length film I've ever seen, minus A Trip to the Moon, which doesn't really count, and also the only silent film I've ever sat all the way through. I tried to watch Metropolis a couple months ago, but I simply could not get through it because that movie is almost 3 hours long, and it was my first silent film ever, and probably not the best choice to jump in. I know who Nosferatu was, or I knew who Nosferatu was, and I knew about it, mainly because of that SpongeBob clip.
If that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
As I'm sure a lot of you watching this video do, and that had me intrigued from day one. I remember asking my mom, who the hell is Nosferatu? Obviously I said hell, I was a thug-ass baby, and my mom would basically go, oh, he's like a vampire. But every time I would ask again after that, it was, oh, he's not a vampire, but he's like kind of similar. So I'm very happy to finally be watching, and let me tell you guys, this is probably the scariest black and white silent film from the 20s I've ever seen. I know I keep emphasizing those three things, but seeing how limited filmmaking was back then, it's very impressive to see film put together this competently unfold in front of you. You really get a feeling for how much like elbow grease was put into films back then. Not to say that it isn't now, because Lord knows there's plenty of elbow grease in plenty of movies, but I just mean the hoops and hurdles that they had to jump through just to get the footage that they wanted, not exactly like they wanted, I know, but like what they wanted, is incredible. And the fact that it comes out so fluently and it never really like surprises you with how old it is very impressive. And I think that's actually where I'll start, the special effects in this movie. Now, this is a weird thing to talk about because the special effects pretty much boil down to speeding up the camera and occasionally stop motioning, but the way it's used in this movie is incredibly effective. The stop motion is incredibly unnerving to watch. There's a scene where Nosferatu, or Count Orlok, depending on who you ask, is loading coffins into the back of a wagon, and at the end jumps in one and the lid stop motion floats onto him. And something about the way stop motion looks, especially in a live action film, is just so off-putting to me. It's so just like weird, like that shouldn't be moving like that at like 2 frames a second, and the older frame rate and things like that also add a lot. I hope you all enjoy the black and white gimmick, by the way, because I think it's hilarious. And to talk about the speeding up footage thing, it's used not nearly as, or no, it's used much more, I should say, and it isn't nearly as like scary looking, but just seeing how they play around it, and you know, the guy sticks his head out and he's like, oh, it's too fast, and he puts his head back in. It's very cute. Something I really appreciate about silent films, and if you haven't seen a silent film, I definitely recommend you watch one just to do this. At least for me, I like to read, I mean, like, if you're like in a plane or something, probably don't do this, but don't watch a silent film on a plane. I like to read all the lines of dialogue out to myself, just like for a little funny. Because it's like I have to put voices onto the characters, and just the way I feel reading out these really intricately crafted lines of dialogue, like the final block of text where it's like, Nosferatu was vanquished by a living sun, things like that. It just feels really like poetic. This movie is very poetic, and you really notice a lot of the roots that Dracula stories would later draw on for this movie, like having to be on home soil and Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I just watched, but also a lot of things that aren't similar, like being able to go outside during day and just being extra tired. I mean, the plague thing is more of just a bite thing, but still, it's a very interesting, it's not really a twist. Well, I don't know when the original Dracula came out. I could be completely wrong, but I want to say it was after they had sound and film. So it's very interesting to see the origins, or what seem like the origins, to one of the most iconic creatures created by Hollywood, or wherever you want to credit it to, of all time, or at least see this version of that creature. The acting is very good for being completely physical. The actor for Count Orlok, or Nosferatu, depending on who you ask, is incredible, and the prosthetics on him look really great. And how could I even talk about Nosferatu without mentioning those damn shadows? I'm going to try right now. It's probably not going to work, but just seeing a shadow move like in a claw very slowly, and I know I said the same thing in Bram Stoker's Dracula, but just seeing a shadow move very slowly, especially in that final scene where he's going really quick across the wall like that, it's incredible. Just the thought that someone came up with that in the 20s is just unfathomable to me. I couldn't come up with that if you gave me 100 years. So yeah, thanks to the technical limits or restrictions, the filmmakers were forced to be a lot more creative and innovative in the medium, which I think is a good thing, like a net gain. Because sure, they could have made this movie better if they had modern tech, but then we wouldn't have some of those unnerving slow motion shots, or the stop motion, I should say, lifting out of the coffin, things like that. As always, limitations add creativity to films inadvertently. And this is a great example of that, because I'm obviously excited for Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. That's one of the reasons I wanted to watch it, actually, just so I could be prepped for that when it comes out in December, I want to say. Because I am very excited for that. I'm a fan of Robert Eggers' filmography. But I just don't think, because I really like this movie. I gave this movie a 9 out of 10. I think it's an excellent, formulative, still pretty scary horror movie from the 20s, and that's just a hard reputation to uphold. And I know Robert Eggers is going to be very good. I know that he knows what he's doing, and it's a modern take on the story. I'm very excited. He's like the one guy I would trust with that kind of story, but I just have a gut feeling that it won't be as good as the 22 one. But I think that's all I have to say. The music as well, the way silent films work, where it's just music playing in the background throughout the whole movie, is I'm not huge on that, but there are some tracks in this movie that are like genuinely beautiful. So it's very hit or miss, and there are definitely a couple songs that just play on loop for like 30 minutes that are horrible. But other than that, like when the vocals get involved of that lady, it sounds remarkable. But I think that's actually all I have to say. This is definitely worth your time if you're into old-timey movies or old horror, or both, or into films at all, because Nosferatu is very formulative and gave us many of the horror tropes that we are oh so very thankful to have today. But that's all I have to say. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in Count Orlok's castle.